All right. Hi, everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming to join us today to talk about invoicing, specifically related to your retainers and your recurring billing. So to kind of get started, my name is Sophia Wilson. I am the Customer Success Team Manager here at Function Point, and I am joined by my absolutely wonderful colleague, Jenny Lee, who is one of our excellent account executives here. Jenny, just checking in. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can. I'm ready to roll. And hello, everybody.
Okay. Wonderful. So let's get started. So to kind of start today, we're going to have our agenda. So with the invoicing, especially related to retainers and recurring billing, there are a few key pieces that I would really like to make sure we cover today. First of all is, of course, the organization of your jobs. I'm going to show you a kind of a pretty key field and a suggestion that I make to all of my agencies that I work with on how to organize your jobs to make the invoicing for it easy for your accountant. Then we're going to do just a quick overview of invoicing in general, because when it comes to the retainers and recurring, I'm going to show you kind of a couple of shortcuts. It's going to make it easier, but ultimately, if you don't understand sort of the basis of all these things, it's going to look confusing. So I want to make sure that we do a quick overview of that for you. Then we're going to go into our multi-job batch for a single invoice, and then, of course, our batch invoicing for multiple clients. So these are the shortcuts I was talking about. So if you were to have a scenario where you would invoice multiple jobs for a single client, but you'd like to make sure it's just on a single invoice, we are able to do that for you, as well as batch invoice all of your jobs for all of your clients at one point as well. So we'll definitely go through that today. Questions. So Jenny is here to answer all of your questions. I will be checking in with her periodically on if there's anything that she feels is relevant to show on screen with us today. If you have any particularly unique scenarios to you and your agency, please, we may not be able to answer them today on the webinar, but we will make sure that your customer success manager or a member of the customer success team is in touch with you to make sure that we answer those, because invoicing is a pretty key piece of the workflow, and we want to make sure that those are done correctly. So if there's any time where you're unsure, never hesitate to chat with our success team. We're here to ensure your success. So learning more with FP, obviously, first of all, congrats, you came to the webinar. It's one of the key pieces to continue that learning. But we also have other tools and resources available to you. And of course, Q&A, our product input, there's lots available, and I'll make sure to point that out when we get into the system as well. Of course, we also have our FP referral program. So if you have any other agencies that you would like to refer, reach out. We definitely have some bonuses for you if you do that. Our next session is going to be 2 weeks from now, same channel, same time, and we're actually going to be reviewing invoicing more again as well. This is going to be concentrating more on fixed price and your time and material work. We do recognize that there is a bit of a difference between those types of invoicing, so we'd like to break them out into 2 separate invoices. Okay, awesome. So let's jump in. To kind of get started, I just want to, again, make sure that you are aware of where all of our extra resources are. So when you do log into your Function Point for the first time, you're going to see the information icon up here next to your name. This is where you can then access our Help Center, which is, of course, our never-ending area of documentation, webinars. You'll be able to access everything. We've even set up some crash courses based off of what your key roles and jobs will be in Function Point. And then, of course, if you're wanting to stay on top of what's new, particularly our new BI reporting, we do also do some updates here as well for that. Now, if you have any brilliant suggestions or ideas on how you think we should continue to develop the software, we definitely want to hear those too. Our product team actually loves to talk directly with our customers as well, so it allows them to really dig deeper into what your idea and requests are. So don't hesitate to submit those, and you can do that through Submit an Idea here just underneath the Help Center. Great. Jenny, I'm just checking in. Usually there aren't any questions at this point yet, but just wanting to make sure that you are all good to go from your end. I think you might still be muted, Jenny, because I can hear you talking on the other side of the room. But
Hello, everybody. So it looks like we have no questions in yet, but I'm here looking at the question panel. So if anybody has questions, feel free to type them in there. And yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yes, please, everyone, send in those questions. Jenny, I know, is eager and very able to answer those as we go through this. Awesome. So kind of to get started, of course, I really want to talk about that organization of your jobs. So when you first initially create your estimates, there is a pretty key field that as you go through implementation with us here at Function Point, we usually recommend be used in a way to organize how you're going to invoice jobs. And that is your category field here. Now, mine's been set up a little more uniquely. You will find in your own system this will probably be set up differently as well. Again, usually based off of how your onboarding has gone, and as we've dug into what your team's workflow and needs are, we've probably rearranged this. But this is how me and my demo system, I would plan on invoicing for different pieces of work within the system. So I've organized it based off of my monthly retainers, my quarterly retainers, my time and materials jobs. So again, anything that I would invoice for that is just strictly timesheets and expenses. And then of course, all my fixed price work. So we definitely have those different options there available to you to make sure that you are invoicing how your accountant would like to be able to just organize, see, and invoice accordingly. So that is, again, really key piece for you. So another quick run through that I wanted to do is just invoicing in general. So you can invoice just directly here through your main navigation bar, and we can add invoice. So everyone should be able to, should be familiar with this workflow. You do have to have a job to be able to create an invoice, but what I wanted to go through is, and this is of course just our single invoice that we have. So it is one of the most basic ways. Oh, Jenny, something is going on? You're not able to see my screen?
Yeah, Sophia, I just want to check that. Were you showing slides or anything of that sort? It's just on my screen, it says waiting to view success team screen.
Of course it is. I was sharing all sorts of slides. So that's embarrassing. All right, are you able to see my screen now?
I sure am. Okay, we're ready to roll.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I do apologize, everyone. Let's just take a quick step back. Again, information and submitting an idea up here in the top right-hand corner. And then, of course, we do have our main page here. So what I was just speaking towards when it came to creating those estimates and utilizing this category dropdown as you are creating your invoices so that as you're creating your estimates so that you can invoice accordingly later. Something that is a pretty major pain point that most accountants will just say is that sometimes they're not really sure, and when there are multiple ways to be able to invoice for work, it's just key to really make sure that these are organized in an easy fashion. So as we have these different categories labeled, we're easily able to come in and say, do a job find based off of that category. You know, I'm going to want to do a search based off of all of my monthly retainers and find, I can either choose to find all of them or just find all the active ones. Again, for that accountant, they're wanting to pull all those monthly retainers that maybe need to be invoiced this month or next month. We can pull those. We can see that there are the 4, and we'll be able to invoice accordingly. So with that, then, of course, we're going to want to touch on, again, just the basic ways of creating invoices. So you do have to have a job to be able to create an invoice. I'm going to just come into my Mac and Co. SEO retainer here. We'll be able to take a look at our retainer, you know, again, do that review. I'm not sure how many people that are attending today were able to attend the retainer webinar a couple of weeks ago, but certainly if you have any questions regarding your retainer, we can tackle those. But this is just a basic retainer that I have set up here. You know, I have the amount of 20 hours totaling $2,000 that I plan on invoicing for. We can come up here, add new, add invoice, and this will take us to our basic invoice page. So when you land on this invoice page, we will have the different types available. Now, these are our very basic types. Of course, a deposit invoice, anytime you plan on taking a certain amount of dollars prior to beginning work on your job that you have and making sure that you know, you have that sort of reassurance that there's going to be payment for that. This we definitely recommend anyone that really practices proper accrual-based accounting. We can practice this with these deposits and apply them to your interim and final invoices later. Then, of course, we have our interim invoices. So this will allow you to create an invoice for any job that you have, as well as keep that job open. So anyone that would practice, you know, different time-based invoicing, maybe invoice every quarter or in thirds over a certain span of time, you can do that, use this invoice type, and continue to invoice accordingly moving forward. From there, we then have our final invoice, and what the final invoice will do is it's similar functionality as the interim invoice in the type of invoice that will be created, but what is the main functionality of it is that it will then shut down the job that you are invoicing so that no one can track any more time and material against that job. Something I always like to take note of as well when it comes to your invoicing is this invoice date. Now, this is kind of a little bit of a funny functionality. It will always invoice all timesheets and expenses from that date since the previous invoice date or the start of that job. So I have spoken with some accountants in the past where, you know, they do all their invoicing on, say, the 5th of the month, but it's for everything from the previous month. So, you know, they're going to do their invoicing on February 5th, a week and a bit from now, but it's for all of their January work that they accomplish. Now, what they're probably going to want to do is backdate their invoice date to January 31st, so that they make sure that they only capture all the timesheets that were put in against those dates, and none of the timesheets or expenses that were inputted from Feb 1st to Feb 5th are not captured on that invoice. So just something to always kind of take note of. It is something that I've seen some issues in the past because there were items that didn't want to be captured, so that invoicing date's actually pretty key. What we then have is then our calculated from. So you have the ability of calculating your invoice from different key pieces. Of course, your estimated amounts, your actuals, your remainder from actuals, and your remainder from estimated. So if you have invoiced for it previously and maybe it wasn't the full amount, you want to make sure you only capture what is remaining. And then, of course, if you leave it as none, it will allow you to also completely override the invoice into what you want. However, don't worry, if you were to choose something and it's not exactly what you wanted, you do also have the ability to make those changes accordingly on the next page as well. All right, Jenny, just checking in. Any questions kind of coming in as we go through today?
No, so far so good in regards to invoicing. We did get a couple of retainer specific questions, and so we'll just circle back and approach those questions directly after
Awesome.
after the webinar.
Yeah, no, and yeah, feel free to send through any strange scenarios. And if for some reason you happen to have a horrible dream about them later this evening while we're not on the webinar, feel free to email success@functionpoint.com as well. We'll still help even outside of these things. Okay, awesome. So let's dive into a pretty specific scenario. First of all, there are times, especially with retainers, where what you're going to have is a set amount that you're invoicing your client. But of course, that could result in any type of work that is happening. And in those cases, your customer is still going to want to see what it was you were working on, but you still need to make sure that they see the specific line item of whatever the agreed upon dollar amount and hours were agreed upon previously. So I've already set up a project here, and it is my Safeway retainer. And what we have in here is the different pieces that are related to this work. I'm actually going to jump into the job financials here. So with this retainer, we've got our Safeway monthly retainer. So no matter what, we plan on providing 90 hours worth of work, and we're going to invoice for $10,000 worth of that. Now, again, Safeway can come at any point and ask for different pieces to be done. Recently, it looks like it's been an entrance sign, a flyer redesign, and of course, a website. So within here, we're still able to come in and review what those actuals were, what we had tracked, and of course, to make sure that we were still on track with what our budget was. Because with retainers, in most cases, you still invoice based off what your agreed upon amounts were, whether you're under or over. So it looks like in this case, unfortunately, we were a little bit over. So also a good time to just double check that we are profitable on all of our jobs and aren't taking on retainers that are not going to bring in money. But of course, it's from bringing on function point that you're going to be able to have that view. So what we're able to do is come up here under Add New, because we're going to create an invoice specifically for Safeway for this retainer. And we're able to come in and click Add Invoice. So you're going to notice a slight difference in this invoice now compared to the previous Add Invoice screen. And that is this new batching section here. And this is where we are able to define if it is a single multi-job invoice. So again, it would be a single invoice for a single client, but it would include multiple jobs on it, or the multiple invoices in a batch. And multiple invoices in a batch, what that allows you to do is actually create single invoices for each job, and they would each be printed individually, which you can do for a single client. In most cases, I usually see agencies I work with use that in cases of multiple clients and just wanting to create multiple batch invoices at once. So for this scenario, we're going to create a single multi-job invoice. The invoice name will automatically pull this year and this month with the title of the project. But if you needed to change the invoice name, you can definitely do that. You can create a specific contact that you want to make sure that this is going to be emailed to directly out of here. And then, of course, that invoice date, we're going to want to just, I'm going to follow my own best practices, and I'm going to do it for the last day of the month so that it's going to capture everything there. What we're going to want to do is calculate this based off of estimated, because that is where we have that $10,000 included in there. And then, of course, for billing percentage, I'm going to bill for the full 100%, so I can leave this blank. However, if in a scenario where you were only wanting to invoice for, say, 50% of the retainer, you could do that at this point as well. You also have the ability to add in tax groups, but just for ease of this scenario today, I'm going to leave that blank. And we're going to go ahead and add invoice. So
Sophia,
yeah.
Quick question just came in. It was quite a good question. That little tax group box there, someone just asked that their agency does not apply taxes. Can that be removed, or how would that look like in that scenario?
Yeah, good question, Jenny. Yeah, and you know what? There are times where maybe taxes aren't being included. You cannot remove that box. It is hard-coded into the system, so we won't be able to remove it. However, you can just make sure that we leave, say, what we can create for you is a no taxes tax option and move that as the default, so that if you wanted to show on your printouts that you're not charging taxes, you will be able to do that, or again, leaving it blank, and then that will just be blank on the printout. Depending on if you are using our QuickBooks integration, you may need to create the no tax, since QuickBooks does still require you to communicate a tax over, even if it's a 0% one. Jenny, does that kind of answer the question, or?
I think it did. Thank you.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. Yes, and I love that you just jumped in. Please do that as we go. You know that. Okay, great. So again, as we go through here, these are going to be your options now of adding in a few other items. So if you need an activity description, you are able to create these by default through the list maintenance in your system, as well as the payment notes. Again, just for ease of this example today, I'm going to leave those blank. And of course, you're able to change whatever accounts receivable this is going into in your QuickBooks accounts. So for those of you using our QuickBooks integration, just double check these and make sure that everything's mapping to the correct spot. Now, the next piece when it comes to creating these batch invoices is actually making sure that you're including the jobs that you want to account for. So when we created this on that page, we had those 4 different jobs available to us. But of course, now we need to actually add them into the invoice. Now, you can do that in a couple of ways. First of all is just add all. And if you go ahead and click that, that will put all of those jobs into that batch invoice for you. Or we can go through and just take a look at all of them. Now, what is really handy about these plus signs, especially if you're adding in each one individually, is that you can get a little bit of an overview of what has happened within these jobs during that time frame that we had put in. So with the Safeway entrance signs, I can actually see that we have 9 uninvoiced timesheets. Now, of course, for this scenario, we're invoicing based off of estimated amounts. So this isn't really as necessary. However, in the next scenario that I'm going to show you where we're going to invoice for multiple jobs at once, it will be a little more key to pick and choose what you want to go through. So for this, I'm going to just click Add All. We're going to submit them all. And you can now see that everything has been added in. What the next stage kind of is you can just go ahead and finish adding to invoice. Again, if everything is set up correctly, there should be absolutely no hesitation in going through and doing this. However, if you're at any point unsure and just wanting to double check, you do have the ability of coming in here and actually editing the different invoice lines and services. So, you know, maybe for some reason, today's example, we're wanting to only invoice for 50% of the estimated amount. So we're not going to invoice for that full $10,000. I actually wanted to make sure that we were only going to invoice for 5,000 of it. You could go ahead and make those changes as you need. Again, just for the accounting package, I need these filled in. So again, you can come in here, you can make those edits. Similar to those single invoice pages, we can override everything as we need. We can go ahead and just click based off of actuals, which of course will clear it all out. I'm going to go ahead and click on the estimated amount, which is again pulling 50% off that estimated amount for us, totaling that $5,000. Whenever you're ready, you can click Save and Close. And then the final step, of course, is finish adding to invoice. Something else now before I do this that I do regularly see as well in a bit of a unique scenario from other agencies is, yeah, you know, we're invoicing based off of that 5 or 10,000 grand, that set amount. However, we also invoice for all expenses above and beyond that amount. That is really just for our time is what we're planning on invoicing for. So in a scenario where you might have a Safeway entrance sign with an expense that maybe is against it, you could come in and edit that to make sure that you're going to invoice for that amount. So maybe even for the design piece here, I'm going to click Invoice and I'm going to put in $500 for that so that this invoice will now equal that $500. We're going to save that, save and close that. And you'll now see that the amount that we were about to invoice is actually now at $5,500 rather than just the $5,000. So if any little changes need to be made to one of the associated jobs, you can go ahead and make those changes. So I'm going to now finish adding this invoice because it is at that dollar amount that I know I'm going to want to invoice our client for. And this is now just that overview of that multi-job invoice that we have. If you wanted to click through, you can see the different jobs that are also associated to it. And then what we're going to want to do is actually take a look at the printout. Now, of course, this is just a basic printout that we have available to you. If you wanted to make any changes, we can certainly do that. But what we have, of course, is that $5,000 for that agreed upon monthly retainer, the additional $500 for the Safeway entrance signs, and then, of course, the other 2 that we don't plan on invoicing for. But we wanted the Safeway, our client, to know that we had been working on it during that time and that it was associated to the retainer for this specific month. Great. Jenny, just check it in again. Any questions at all?
So far, not yet. Just asking Sophia, you mentioned earlier we can have this on separate pages as well too. It doesn't have to be all grouped together, right? There was an option for that you showed earlier. Just confirming.
Yeah, good question. So that's actually going to be the next scenario that I'm going to walk us through. But yes, we can create in the standard batch invoicing scenario, all of these jobs would be in separate invoices rather than just listed in this view.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, great. So let's go into that sort of next piece, which is the batch invoicing for multiple jobs. And scenarios that I regularly see with this, and this is more in like your recurring billing. So it's not necessarily a retainer, so it's not necessarily a set amount that you have agreed upon, but it's just a job that, you know, say for your SEO, and you're always going to work on SEO, and based off of how much work they needed done, you're going to invoice based off the actuals for that client. So at the end of every month, you're always going to invoice based off of however much time material had incurred against that piece of work. And we may have multiple jobs like that for different clients. So with something like that, we can come underneath our jobs and find jobs. And this is the quickest way of being able to accomplish this. Again, we're going to utilize that category drop-down that we have. And for our option today, I'm actually going to do fixed price. So this is all of our fixed price jobs. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to continue with the same scenario. We're going to do time material. And what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to, I'm going to search for all of our find active today. So within this, now I have 13 jobs, 13 open jobs that we have an agreement with all of our clients that we're going to just invoice them based off of whatever actuals had been put against those jobs during that specific month. And your accountant's able to come, pull this list, as long as making sure that everyone's all up on their timesheets, as well as expenses. Please, everyone, make sure you're always on top of those. You don't want the accountant coming after you. I know I wouldn't want my accountant coming after me. So just a word of caution. So what you're now going to notice is this add invoice option up here. So this is that batch invoicing that I was speaking towards. And again, with this add batch invoice page that we've now landed on, of course, it's going to give us the option of an interim or a final invoice here. These are the only options. It's not breaking it out based off of that multi-job single invoice or the batch, because in a case like this, there are multiple companies that we are invoicing for, so it can't be a multi-job single invoice because those can only be done for single clients. The batch name is always going to pull the date of the day. Again, if we need to edit this slightly, we can, but this is going to be the batch name that is going to associate itself to pretty much every job, as well as, of course, the job name later on. So keep it generic. I have seen scenarios where people are making it a little bit too specific, and it's more specific to a single job rather than all of them that are in there. So for time material, I know that I'm wanting to invoice based off of actuals, since that is what all these are based off of. Our agreement is time material, and I'm going to want to do it for 100%, so I'm going to leave this blank. And then, of course, just for the scenario today, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to leave taxes off. Then we're going to add the batch invoice. So again, similar page as what we were looking at before. We have that batch name option to change, activity description, of course, payment notes. We can edit those in the list maintenance if any changes need to be made. And now here's where it's a little more important. So this is when we're now adding in those different jobs. So in the scenario that I was speaking of before, where we're actually reviewing each of the jobs and what had been applied against it, we were able to see, of course, we have that overview now that there are 4 uninvoiced timesheets for this job. So I'm able to go ahead and just click that. So we're able to do a little bit of a review here. You know, that summer micro, there's even an expense against it, great. However, this Branson financial website, there's nothing against it. So I actually don't need to invoice them this month. So I'm going to skip that. So again, your accountant's able to come through and just make sure that everything, they can do the review at this level rather than having to go into each job individually to make sure that everything is being invoiced correctly. So again, just a nice little overview here. We're just going to add everything in. That one's 0 and 79 uninvoiced timesheets. That's great. So of all of these, we're going to be leaving 3 of them out. Again, if we needed to make any changes, maybe we'll even go ahead and find that one that had the expense against it. I believe that was this one. Yeah, so we even had our printing expense here against this, and making sure that we are invoicing for that later. Maybe for some reason the expense wasn't applied against there, so I want to make sure that this is applied against that. We'll save and close, because now we've boosted up this invoice from $250 to $2,050. Right, great. And then whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and finish adding to batch. And this is now all of your individual invoices that are for all of the different jobs that we had just pulled in that previous list. Now, just by default, the system's going to show the first one for you in this. However, if you come underneath this batch section, you'll then be able to go into each individual invoice and have that option. Now, a lot of you that are maybe sending single invoices out of the system, you're familiar with the notify client option where you can actually email it directly out of the system to them. So if for some reason there's some of these that we don't want to email, this would be where you would remove it. And then, of course, notify the selected. Go ahead, send that email out of the system, or if they have a link to the FP portal, you can do that as well. Now for this printing, we're just going to do the summary view. And this, of course, is just that first invoice, but this is what they would all look like for those individual ones. And if you wanted to check out any of the other ones, we could just come on in and print. And now we have that second invoice for us for invoice number 145. So again, in this case, we've invoiced multiple clients for multiple jobs, but they're creating a single invoice for each of those jobs because they're not going to the same client and we needed individual invoices. However, we wanted to make it a little bit easier for your accountant. So Jenny, just check it in again. I know that this can be one that blows some accountants' minds, thinking that it's going to make things a whole lot easier. Any specific questions that have come in, or is there anything that you feel like I didn't cover that I should make sure I touch on?
Nope, I just feel like something worth mentioning, I get asked a lot as an account executive, is the addresses up there. Like knowing that you can save multiple contacts, because sometimes you might be sending that invoice to a different team member that was involved in the project. So maybe you can touch a little bit about how much control they have over that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you have lots of control when it comes to a single invoice when it comes to those items, not when it comes to the batching. Batch invoicing will only pull based off of your original estimate contact that you had applied when creating the estimate. So a really big best practice that we always recommend to everyone is when you're adding in the estimate, make sure you add in that estimate contact. So that would be your main point of contact at the client, because in those cases, then you can send out the estimate printout directly to your client. And then, of course, the invoices, especially in that batch invoice scenario that we just went through, where we have the notify client option, again, through this batch, it's automatically going to pull that estimate contact that we have for you. So, yes, make sure that those are filled in correctly. Of course, if you needed to come into a specific one and change that, it's just a little more time consuming to have to go through each individual invoice that you have and change that, but you could come in and change whoever your main point of contact is to make sure that that is who the invoice is sent to. So if you do notice any changes, just come underneath basic info, edit, and just edit whoever the invoice contact is. Jenny, I know you're talking about a much more specific workflow in regards to being able to invoice, say, 50% to one person and 50% to another one. That is certainly more, I find that more regularly used in the fixed price and time material conversation that we will have a couple weeks from now. So, you know what, just a really good point, and I'll make sure I add that to my agenda then.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophia.
Okay, great. Is there, again, that was really everything I wanted to make sure I covered today. If there are no more questions, Jenny, that you want to make sure that we touch on, I will log off for the morning. Again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you. If you do have any questions, concerns, we'll stay on the line for another minute or two just to continue answering those. But of course, again, if you wake up in a sweat later tonight, unable to think of a solution, do not hesitate to, if you know who your customer success manager is, reach out directly to them or email the entire team at success@functionpoint.com. We're here to help with all of your training and workflow related questions and needs. Okay, awesome. Jenny, thank you so much for joining me today. It was lovely hosting a webinar with you for the first time, and I look forward to doing more with you again in the future.
I would say it was a success, and thank you everybody for submitting your questions. I know there were some very specific ones, and we'll circle back. I just took note of those, and we'll contact you directly.
Awesome. Okay, thank you everyone. Happy Wednesday.